Vav, we're up to Sif Yud Beis. Incidentally, I mentioned yesterday, we were talking about that in America they only use one hair for the animal. So I mentioned yesterday, I don't know if everyone heard it, but there's up on the way to the Kashering Mountains, on the way to go into the countries. I forgot which town it is, but there's a place over there where they sell deer meat. And they got a geschochten. It's called, in English, it's called venison. And they, Rabbi Belsky, Allah Shalom, taught some people how to be menaka the back part of it, because the deer is not a big animal, so how to be menaka the back part of it. We also spoke yesterday that in the chicken there's the inner part of the chicken, so it sounded strange that people eat like the intestines of the chicken, the lungs and everything. But the Shulchan Aruch in Yehudeya, there's a whole simon about by Mericha, by Kashering those inner parts, because by says that there's people that used to eat it, or maybe other people still eat it. We don't, we throw it out. But okay. So we learned over here, yesterday we learned that the shir of Mericha is an hour. There's a half hour for soaking, and then there's an hour for Mericha. So, and we learned that B'shas Chak, it could be 24 minutes. There's a shir milk. So now he says as follows: La'achar sheshor habasar munach la'achar shehoya habasar munach b'mochai k'shurim. After the meat was laying for an hour in the salt, Yenapis mimenu hamelech, you should shake off the salt, heitev, good, umanichan oisei gimapam b'mayim heitev. And then you have to wash off the salt 3 times in water. And you know, by Matilas Yadayim, the Veld washes Matilas Yadayim 2 times on each hand. The shaila is how far they go. That's different in Hogam. If it's just the fingers, or is it the whole palm of the hand? That's different days in Shulchan Aruch. And Lubavitch the minhag is, and there was recently in the Ayam Yom from this week or last week, that you do 3 times. And when they asked the Rebbe Rashab why he does 3 times, he referred to this din of rinsing over here 3 times in the Shulchan Aruch. One of the Nosei Kelim Taka says the wipes 3 times. So it should say you wash it off good. He says like we find by Netilas Yadayim. So that's where comes the mocha for Lubavitch Minhag. V'isha yiras Hashem yesh lo lashgiach ba'atzmo al hadochas habasar. She herself should watch the rinsing of the meat. Why? So kilofamim have meshosas asher asher because of tisas amayim it tamsem yichayim lo begudei chas v'sholom ve'isadam. That means that this is of all the Zeiten when the Shulchan Aruch, when the halach was written down in Shulchan Aruch, people didn't have plumbing in their homes. You didn't have a sink that you turn on the faucet and the water keeps going. You had to go to the well and put down a pail in the well, bring it up, and then later you brought it to the house. It was a whole job to carry a pail of water. The houses that had help, a meshosas, so they used to go do it. But if the meshosas will be the one that will be rinsing the meat, so she will calculate that I'm not going to do it with so much water, because it means that I'm going to have to go hard and work later. Now, how could you come to Isadam? If the meat was soaked, and the meat was salted, and the meat was washed off, how can you come to Isadam? Because the problem is that there may be some dam laying on the meat yet. And so later you're going to cook the meat, and you're not going to be careful, so you'll be cooking, it'll be dam shabishchay. Or it could be sometime a person got the meat delivered. So the first thing they do is they kasher them. First, some people, as soon as they get the delivery, they put it in the refrigerator, put it into the freezer. No, that's not good to do that. Why is it not good to do that? Because when it becomes in the freezer, first, number one, like we spoke already, it depends if you have a frost-free freezer or not. If you don't have a frost-free freezer, so then the frost or ice accumulates on it, is a shayla if that ice doesn't make it like kovush. That's a shayla already. Another problem is that if you put it in the freezer, so then when you put it into the water, it may not soften yet. It may so come to that the salting wasn't good. A third problem could be that we have a din that I mentioned this. There's the lashon Aidi the Torah gemiflat lebola, which means that when the meat is giving out the blood, it doesn't take back in the blood. However, if the blood remained on the chicken, and there's still maybe some salt also there, if it is good, then Veta Shaila, what happens if blood after a certain amount of time, does it go back into the meat or not? In the Shulchan Aruch there are 2 days. There's one day that it was 24 hours, and another day is 12 hours. That it was only 12 hours, then it goes back into the meat. So there could be a lot of problems with the meat, not realizing that's saying come chas v'sholom to a shayla of dam, u'tzricha lizar, sheloi laniach as abasa b'tach kli, b'li mayim, kadim shehudach. You shouldn't let it lay there, because you're laying there long enough, it could be a shayla that it's going to come back into the meat. Incidentally, this has nothing to do with the halacha that we're learning, but I once gave a drasha to parents about every child. You have to find in him his quality. There's no such thing that my son is good for nothing. There's no such thing like that by a person. You have to find the quality. Like I used to tell the teachers in the yeshiva, not every kid in the class is shaykh to, let's say, the learning Gemara and Taisus. But the teacher, many times, has a class of 20 students and is really learning with 10 of them. And the other 10 are just sitting around and getting bored. So you have to try to find that every student, maybe he can excel in Chumash, or he can learn Chumash. Try to get from every student what you could get. So I told the story. I used this mashal for this because it reminded myself by going to the well to get water. There was sometimes people used to go to the well, so sometimes they take one pail, and there's a way to put a bar around your shoulder, and you can have 2 pails. You can have 2 pails. It's heavier, but they want to save the trip, so they do it the harder way. So there was this lady who used to go to the well to bring water, and she has 2 pails. It turned out that one pail had a crack in it. So as she's going from the well to her home, little by little, water is dripping out. And when she came home, she had 1 full pail and 1 half pail. So one time, the half pail apologized to her. And the half pail says to her, I feel bad. You fill me up a full pail by the well, and I'm sort of cheating you that you're only coming home with a half pail. So the old lady was a smart lady. She says to the pail, don't feel bad. Why don't feel bad? She says, I want to tell you something. Go along the road from the well to the home, and you'll notice an interesting thing. On the side of the full pail, there's pebbles along the road. On your side, there's flowers growing along the road. In other words, from your water that's dripping, there's flowers that are growing. So that means the lesson of that is that everybody has certain qualities that could produce. And you have to figure out how those qualities, you get to those qualities and appreciate what's happening. Let's put again, the children is a very important lesson to remember. Okay, we'll go further. Tzarech lizor ba'ifus v'hoses hareish kaidem ashriya. By chickens, you have to be careful to take off the head before you soak it. In other words, separate the head. And the reason for this is because in the head there isn't much blood. So the whole thing doesn't really apply so much. Ve'im nimach ha'oif im hareish yasa shelus chacham. There's a shaila. The shaila is that the blood that's coming out of the rest of the body could have gone into the head, because the head didn't have so much blood in it. So maybe it finished its salting much earlier, being finished much earlier. So we say, I did the tarach lemiflat lebola, but once it finished giving out, then it can take in. So it becomes a shaila, but again, if it's salted together. By the head of the behemoth is also the same problem. So you have to watch if they salt it, because there are parts from the head that you could use. Like I once said when I get to Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah state that you should take a Rosh Kevis or Rosh Ayel. So people ask me, what happens if you can't get the head? I said, take what's called cheek meat. It's an expensive meat. It's a very soft meat in the head of the animal. They cut out the cheek meat and they sell that separately. So they have to salt the whole head. They don't, when they do it. Basa shaloi nimach adayin. Unsalted meat. Lo yanichena b'makom shel lebomim yesha melech. Don't put it in a place where there's salt on the table. Same reason, because it'll start to come out a little bit, but it'll be a little bit and not complete. V'yesh l'yachet kli l'basa l'chud, shaloi l'aniach b'klei zeh yerokes, l'peides, u'k'yetze bem, dvarim shadakum lecha b'loi hadochem. In other words, you should have a separate keli, like we learned even before, that the keli in which they soak the meat, you shouldn't use it for other things. So what does it mean you shouldn't use it for other things? Because it could be that there's some blood in it that came out from the meat. You put the thing in it, you put other food in it, it will mix with the blood. That was very nice shayla. But if it's a thing that you don't eat without adocha, let's say there's people that they don't eat fruit, potatoes, okay? When you want to make potatoes, you first wash off the potato, and then you peel the potato. Well, so there's no problem if it was laying in that pail and it touched the blood, because you're going to wash it off and you're going to peel it. Kidam min habosa nidbak b'keli, or min hakeli nidbak b'hem. Because we're concerned that it could be that blood that came out of the meat is sticking to the keli, and now when you put in other things into that keli, so it will grab, it'll stick to the food, and you're not going to wash it. You'll eat it without washing. So it'll be a problem. Haraish, the head, tzrichen l'chaytchay kait mishriya. If you want to use the head, so first of all, you have to cut it off, separate it from the rest of the chicken.
Wel juist dat beglaal. Wel juist dat beglaal. Kopen na chicken.
Well, you have to realize there's people that there is a little bit of meat in there.
Heb zo'n Rusland, maar altijd hebben ze.
No, there's a little bit of meat in there, and by people it's a cheshbon.
Stop wat ze essen dan.
There's one of the caterers once told me that they use a lot of schnitzel, and what they do with all the bones. So he said that he has families that gives it away to. Yeah, there's a little bit of meat left on the bones, and
Bones good for soup.
that's one thing. But how much bones could you use for soup? You know, they have the bones is found a bissel flesh with them, and the cup is a bissel flesh.
No, in the bones,
Right.
Dat is heel gezond.
So he says, you have to cut it off before you soak. To take out the brain from the chicken. Say, in the head of the chicken, there's a brain. The brain is really meat, but the brain has a shell in it. It's a casing that the brain is. Now, I think we don't eat mayach, but we're talking about people that do eat it. So you have to open up, like cut open the mayach, because you have to salt it. And if it's going to be in the casing, so it will never get salted because it's protected. And you have to soak it and melt and soak it and melt and soak it and salt it separately. Now, you don't have to cut off the hair on the chicken, or the hair means over here the feathers. You have to take off the feathers, whatever is left. There's not much feathers by the head, but there's a little pieces over there. That's what we call marrow, or in Yiddish called a machbein. If the bone still has meat attached to it, so then you could salt it together with the meat. The idea is, let's see one more. Im nifredu min abasa umochan b'fnei asfam yimachem b'fnei asfam. It says to say, if it's only bone, so then bone has very little blood in it. You have to salt the bone also. We'll learn later in Shulchan Aruch, if there's an egg in the chicken, the egg is fleshig, and you have to salt the egg. But it's done separate. Why? It's all the same concept. Because being that there isn't much blood, so it finishes giving out much quicker than the rest of the other blood. They shouldn't lay with the salt next to the meat, because the blood that's coming out of the meat may go back in to the bone. Ragle behemoths, the feet of the behemoth. Now people, they buy the feet of the behemoths. They make what they call pachar, or some people call it galareta. There's different names for it. So, and they make that from the bone, from the cartilage of the bone. So tzrichen rachte roshe hatrafayim kaidem hashriya. So the behemoth has like a hoof, the bottom of the foot. It's hard like a rock, and that's like the shoe of the behemoth. So he says you have to cut that off before, because you want the blood to drip down, and that's going to hold the blood back that it wouldn't drip out. So therefore he says that you have to you have to cut off the hoofs of the behemoth, kaidem ashriya, before the soaking, in order that the blood should be able to run off from the foot. You have to put it, the board, the salting board has a slant, right? So you put it on the board, not with the bottom of the foot going down the slant, but it should be up on top. Because up on top, it's all open. It's part of the body, that part of the foot. So the blood will be able to drip down. If you put it with the hard part on the bottom, or even though you took off but it still is hardened, the blood wouldn't be able to drip down. That's the saying of it. You have to put them. But Eifen, Shayuchu Adam, that the blood can be able to flow down. The Gam Arasitis. Over there also, the behemoth has hair, or the chicken, you could put it. Halev, the heart, if people eat it. The lave is also, the heart is full of blood. The whole heart is that there's blood in the heart, and it keeps pumping from there back and forth. It goes through the heart. So you have to cut it open before the soaking. Hareya. Hareya is the lungs. See, Gamkein Yesh L'Chodcha. It's the same shaila over there. There's a shaila b'chala if the lungs have blood in it. But we paskin that sometimes there's fat on the lungs, and the lungs, the fat has some blood in it. So therefore he says that Hareya Gamkein L'Chodcha L'Ftayach HaKanoikis HaGadayla Shabo Kaidem Ashriya. That if you want to use the lung of the animal, so there's how do you touch kanaikis? That's a type of a branch. It's a branch that comes off the lungs. That the heart has like branches coming off it. Okay. Hakaved. Now we're going to the liver. The liver is a very interesting part of the animal. What does the liver consist of? The whole liver consists of blood. The whole liver is blood. That's what the liver is. So it's talking. So therefore he says, being that the liver is blood, so you can't salt it and you'll never get the blood out. There's so much in it. So the only way to do it is by roasting it. And that's what he's going to learn now about roasting the liver. And that brings up a lot of different shilas about roasting the liver. How do you roast the liver? We'll learn that. Have to stop the davening. We'll learn that Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. There's different shilas. Could you roast the liver on what do they call the thing? What you have outside?
Barbecue.
Huh?
Barbecue.
Yeah. On a barbecue. Could you roast it on a barbecue? When we roast liver, there's two ways that they do it in the butcher store. One way to do it in the butcher store is they have it hanging. It's hanging, and under it there's a big fire, and the big fire draws out the blood, and it keeps dripping out till it gets at least half baked. That's Rosh Hashanah. Another way that we do it is we put it on the fire, and we have a metal thing with holes in it, and we lay it on that metal thing, and it will come out. So the question is, could you use a barbecue we'll talk about that tomorrow. And what if the fire is not under, the fire is on top? There used to be some type of broiler that they had two parts to it. There was the cover had in it the fire is and the bottom was just a plate with a grate on which to put the meat on. Does the fire have to be under, or could the fire be on top? Well, these are all different shilas that they talk about when they get to roasting meat. And then if you roast the meat, if it made sli, could you cook it afterwards? Huh? It's another shilah. So there's a lot to talk about when they get to the liver, which we'll leave for tomorrow, Mr. Shah.